Welcome in once again to the Sunday Nighter on the Talkin Tide podcast. I am your co-host, Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined from a remote locale by my other fine co-host, Travis Reier, the senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. More on that in just a minute. The Talkin Tide podcast available to you wherever you like to get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts. You can catch us live on Facebook and YouTube as well. The Twitter feed is Talkin_Tide. You can get links very quickly to all of our podcasts through that Twitter feed. So be sure to check that out and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We want to thank our sponsors really quickly, Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa and North River Dental Associates. More on them, as well as our corporate sponsor, DraftKings, a bit later in this edition of the podcast. Travis, we bring you in. You look warm and cozy in those cabin environs there.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm bounty hunting for the outlaw Josie Wales. What I'm doing right now.
Yeah,
trying to run him down. Finally bring him to justice. But no, man, just
watch out for red legs.
Yeah, a little cabin life. Red legs. He was awful. Just awful, but a little cabin life here the next few days. Not too bad.
Alabama, of course, completed its final scrimmage of the preseason on Saturday afternoon at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Storm system coming into Tuscaloosa actually cut it a little bit short. Nick Saban saying that they were robbed of about 10 plays on each side, but they did manage to get some pretty good work in, Travis, and it was a Red Elephant Club scrimmage, so of course the Songbirds were out. Not only after, but
they was singing
the scrimmage. Yeah,
they was singing into yonder can.
No question. They like to sing. Nick Saban's comments afterwards, though, lamented the twos for sure. Did not like what he saw from a depth standpoint and the second units really on either side of the ball. I think particularly on offense, but did say he felt like the first team was improved. And I thought most notable in that was the offensive line and the wide receivers as well. No drops. That's something that Saban's been lamenting going all the way back to the spring. I wrote about that in my column off of the scrimmage. No drops among the first group, and it looks like they were pretty crisp in the passing game.
Yeah, it sounded like absolutely the receivers stepped forward after a not so impressive outing maybe the previous Saturday. So that was a good thing to hear Nick Saban talk about and to get some other accounts in terms of how some guys step forward to go along with Jermaine Burton, Ja'Cory Brooks, Kobe Prentice, another one of these true freshmen that it sounds like might be hard to keep out of a rotational role of some sorts. Treyshawn Holden, an experienced guy, sounds like he stepped up in a big way on Saturday. So good stuff from the receivers. The first group on that offensive line, you're two scrimmages in, Chase. Dare we go ahead and venture to guess that that's the five we're going to see against Utah State? Kind of has that feeling to it at this point, doesn't it?
You know, you really – I don't think there's much of any shuffling going on in the aftermath of the second scrimmage at any spot, but especially the offensive line where you need to have you need to gel with what you got. You need to go with what you have. And sure, there could be a midseason shuffle, but it certainly looks like J.C. Latham and Tyler Steen have locked down those tackle spots. Latham on the right side, Steen over on the left side. Sounds like Kendall Randolph continues to get a lot of work at left guard. I believe Javian Cohen worked more with the twos, and he was a regular starter last season. So that's been
14 one games. Yeah.
It's been an interesting development there.
It has. And again, we've talked about sort of the situation involving Javion over the summer. Needed to address some things off the field. Sounds like he took some nice and needed steps in that direction. That being said, on the field, a guy like Kendall Randolph chomping at the bit for an opportunity to finish his career at Alabama as an every down starter. And you're right. Sounds like at that left guard position, maybe right now he's in a position to do that next to Tyler Steen.
I have it on, I'll call it relatively high authority, Travis, that Bryce Young was 20 of 25 for 360 plus and 4 scores in this scrimmage. Holden caught a big chunk of that, over 180 yards for him. I understand he beat DeMarco Helms for one big play. So it would certainly be a big boost to this offense if they're able to get, whether it's Holden or Earl when he comes back or Brooks. They need a couple guys really to step up alongside Jermaine Burton and make an impact. Doesn't sound like Tyler Harrell's there yet. May have to be somebody else.
Yeah, with Holden, you kind of figured with Earl out and Aaron Anderson not really a part of things right now due to injury there at that inside receiver position, and Christian Leary still trying to grow and work through some inconsistencies, maybe where his hands are involved as much as anything else. There's an opportunity there in those 3 wide receiver sets, not just with that third spot, but the second spot as well. But it seems like it's becoming more and more easier anyway to draw some conclusions as to an early in the season top 3 with Burton and Brooks and perhaps Holden, who, by all accounts, again, some explosive plays in that scrimmage on Saturday. And that's sort of the thing when you think about Treyshawn Holden, you wonder about a little bit. Good size, 6'3", 210 or so. Doesn't make you think of Jamison Williams. Not many guys do when it comes to the vertical passing game. But it sounds like he did some good things both down the field, stretching the field, but then also after the catch. And if he can do that, again, when you go back to his size and those attributes, you already feel good about him where red zone and third down situations are concerned.
You do. And Young's got to build some chemistry with. It's got to start with 2 guys. If you've got 3, that's great. You at least need 2. He's got. He'll be able to find Cameron Latou, who cannot be forgotten in this discussion, right? He should be just about back now or pretty close to it. When camp began, he was supposedly a couple weeks away with a knee injury. Certainly you'd think he'd be back in time for the Utah State game. Cameron Latou showed out, I thought, pretty effectively as a pass catcher last season as well. And when he gets back healthy, it's going to help them all.
Yeah, and then Gibbs coming in from Tech with his ability to catch it out of the backfield. Maybe more diversity when you think about it. Not as dependent upon the guys on the outside maybe as they were a year ago. I mean, they were hella dependent on Jamison Williams and John Mechie. But, Brian Robinson was effective enough as a receiver. But with Jahmyr Gibbs, you're talking about the potential of a touchdown every time he catches it, regardless of where he catches it on the football field. So there's a comfortability too, though, that Bryce seems to have developed, even with some of these guys not being frontline options a year ago. Treyshawn Holden's one of those guys. That's been evident. Treyshawn, I think in the game against Georgia in January, caught 6, 7, 8 passes. Now, didn't total a lot of yards, but again, just in terms of that confidence that Bryce has in these guys, Treyshawn's been one of those guys. He hit Brooks on some big plays, especially in that Auburn game last November. And of course, you expect that to be the case with Burton. So that's what I like about this dynamic too. Yes, there's a lot of production to replace, but from Bryce's vantage point, doesn't seem like he has much of a problem or a hesitancy in terms of looking some of these new guys or newer guys up.
Emmanuel Henderson apparently working some at wide receiver as well, noteworthy from Nick Saban's post-practice comments. You talk about Gibbs and his ability to catch it out of the backfield. He was very effective at Georgia Tech in that regard, and it's been nothing but glowing reviews on him in that regard since he arrived for spring practice. I wonder, and this is speculative on my part, this is nothing I've heard from a practice field source, but I wonder, Travis, if they might not work Gibbs out, split out, like they did with Kenyon Drake a little bit, try to catch a linebacker on him possibly in the passing game where instead of throwing them swing passes from the backfield, just go ahead and line them up out there and give them wide receiver space.
Yeah, one of my original things that I came to mind anyway when it was evident that Jahmyr Gibbs was going to be joining the program was exactly what you're talking about. And, maybe that goes back to more 21 personnel with two backs on the field, but his skill set is such that absolutely you can use him in that sort of fashion. In fact, if you go back and you watch Georgia Tech the last season or two while he was there, that was already something Tech was doing. So I would think that Bill O'Brien has done his due diligence from a history perspective with Jahmyr Gibbs. And if he hadn't already thought of that, I'm guessing it came to him pretty quick. And so, Nick Saban loves his explosive plays, man. And, kind of like first five of an offensive line or pass rush combinations on defense, however he can produce those at a maximum rate, he's going to look to do that with his personnel. So a lot of versatility, though, with Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of what they might be able to do this season with him in the lineup.
I want to thank those of you out there who have joined us live here on either Facebook or YouTube. Paul Malone checking in, a Talkin Tide fan on the Facebook comments. Good to have Paul along for the ride here on the Sunday Nighter. Going to thank a couple of sponsors right now, Travis, and then move on to talk a little bit about the defensive side of the football from the scrimmage. But first, going to tell you all about North River Dental Associates and that great service you get from Dr. Jack Smalley and none other. He's got a great staff of dental hygienists over there, conveniently located in Fairfax Park, right off of Watermelon Road. Dental implants, oral surgery, dentures, endodontics, they do it all. Laser dentistry, pediatric dentistry, cosmetic dentistry, porcelain veneers, teeth whitening services, always popular, and of course, also doing Botox and Juvederm treatments to tighten up those facial features for you at North River Dental Associates on a routine cleaning, which you need to get in there and do twice a year. They will get you in and out of there typically in under an hour. Last time I was there, I spent as much time chatting with Jack as I did get my teeth worked on and still got out of there in under an hour. It's always a great experience at North River Dental. If you'd like to make an appointment, NorthRiverDentist.com is the website. You can do it there or give them a call at 205-752-3506. It is North River Dental Associates.
I'm going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. There you see them, the traditional favorite, the hand-dipped chocolate strawberries. There you see it. Really the staple of the Peterbrook Chocolatier arsenal, that outstanding chocolate popcorn there at Peterbrook. Peterbrook Chocolatier coming up on that 15th birthday, Goodbread. A decade and a half of decadence.
Yeah.
A decade and a half of decadence. And the champions of chocolate just keep rolling there at Peterbrook Chocolatier. I know they certainly appreciate all the folks that have made the last 15 years such a great thing for both Peterbrook Chocolatier and the Tuscaloosa area. 205-752-0211. You can give them a call if you have that special order. Holidays are going to be here before you know it. So if you're in charge of maybe the family get together or a corporate sort of gifting initiative, give that number a call and go ahead and get them started for you. You'll have a lot less stressful holiday season for it.
I guess that Peterbrook launch coincided with the Nick Saban tenure launch, did it not? 07?
Yeah, or I think Peterbrook looks at it like Nick's tenure coincided.
Right. Yeah.
With Peterbrook start. No, seriously, you're absolutely right. Peterbrook Chocolatier, 2007, September 1st, I believe it was. And right about that same time, you had Nick Saban in his debut against, it was the Catamounts, wasn't it? Of Western Carolina.
And Terry Grant busted one for about 50 yards right out of the gate for you.
Yes. Yeah. So there you go. Been a hell of a duo in Tuscaloosa, right?
No doubt. Finally, going to tell our folks all about DraftKings. That would be our corporate sponsor. Football fans, join the next generation of fantasy football with Rainmakers Football, the first NFT fantasy game from DraftKings. It's the only NFT fantasy game licensed by the NFLPA. You can play all season for millions in prizes by building the ultimate NFT franchise. Right now, you can get your first full roster starter pack for free. Playing Rainmakers is simple. You buy, you sell, you bid, and win player card NFTs. Biggest names in the game through regular drops and auctions on the DraftKings marketplace. Next generation of fantasy sports is here. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app right now. Sign up with promo code TPPN. That'll help us out here on Talkin Tide. It's the acronym for the Pigskin Podcast Network. TPPN is your promo code. You click the Rainmakers file, and you opt in to get your first card for free. Once again, it's DraftKings. All right, Travis. Flipping it over here, and we're going to talk a little bit of defense before we get out of here on this edition of Talkin Tide. Some interesting things coming out of the scrimmage in that regard. Terry and Arnold getting a lot of work with the ones. We'll start there. Kyrie Jackson and Eli Ricks have both been dinged up a little bit in camp. And Arnold, by every account that's come to my ears anyway, has done a really nice job of stepping into what's been a little bit of a practice void. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's locked down a starter's job, but he's done good work with the opportunity he's been given.
Yeah, can't make the club from the tub, right? And so with a couple of corners down and or limited here of late, Terry and Arnold getting a lot of run there opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry, and pretty much what you said, hearing some positive things about him as a second-year player, still very new to the sort of situation he's been thrust into here of late. But I don't get the sense either that there's this panic if it is Terry and Arnold to go along with Kool-Aid McKinstry. Would I expect him to take some lumps even as recently as Saturday scrimmage? Yeah, I would. I think that's probably where he's still at in terms of his development. But critical factors that we hear so much about from Nick Saban, the things he looks for in a corner: size, man coverage ability. You got to be smart. You got to be able to tackle. You got to be able to play in space. Sounds like Terry and Arnold can do all those things, but it will be interesting in these next few days, especially as we get closer to Depth Chart Monday, to see if Eli Ricks can get back into that thing from a health perspective, first and foremost, and then Kyrie Jackson coming off an issue of his own. And, is it too late at this point for one of those two guys to make a serious run at the top of the depth chart with just a little bit of a week left before game week?
Elsewhere in the secondary, Jordan Battle, who was dinged up in practice a little bit this week himself, he was out there, Travis. And from what I understand, he was out there in a black shirt. But I guess the rule was you couldn't block him. No one told him he couldn't hit because from what I understand, he lit a couple people up pretty good early in the scrimmage in a black shirt. So there you have that. It looks like Jordan Battle's just fine.
Sounded like it. Sounded like he was making plays pretty much from the outset. And so that's great news, just that he was out there in any capacity after some of the message board and internet panic that consumed the Alabama fan base to a large extent late last week. But to hear that he's going to be fine, and not only that, looking exactly like you hope he would look at this point going into his final season in the program, that's all the better.
Linebacker position, I got kind of, I guess I'll say, conflicting reports from scrimmage viewers about the Moody / Deontay Lawson exchange at inside linebacker next to Henry To'oTo'o. One felt like Moody looked like the guy. The other one felt like Lawson got in there and worked with the ones enough that job still could be up in the air. Like we said at the top of the show, though, it's getting a little late for these position battles to linger much further, Travis, because we're at the point now where the coaching staff has got to start cutting reps down for backups and accelerating reps for starters.
Yeah, you can get as situational, I think, at that inside linebacker position right now as you want to, too. I would think Henry To'oTo'o is the every down guy. But Deontay Lawson, watching him in pass coverage a little bit, we've gotten to see to this point, really impressive. He's impressive between the tackles, too. Don't get me wrong. But man, I mean, there are scenarios where you could get all three of those guys into the mix on a down by down basis. Again, thinking that To'oTo'o is the one guy that's every down, but with the different things you can do with base and nickel, and even in the dime package, if you wanted to, you could spread some reps around three guys. I don't know if that's the ideal scenario. But if you got two guys at one spot like Moody and Lawson that are deserving of playing time, and you trust them both, maybe that's a situation, Chase, we see extend over into the regular season.
And speaking of getting three guys on the field at the same time, the Anderson, Turner, Braswell trio that we've heard about, maybe in dime rabbits looks, third and long, etc. That continues to be something Alabama works with. Sounds like that they went with that trio on the field together a little bit more than expected this past Saturday.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see those three guys on the field with two inside linebackers. That's five right there. Let's say you're in nickel, so you're going to have three outside linebackers, two inside linebackers, and one defensive line, one true defensive end nose tackle type.
One big defensive tackle maybe that can handle two gaps or two players or two offensive linemen.
Yeah. Now look, the X factor and all that's Will Anderson, because when you look at it in terms of measurables, you're light. I mean, you're just light as far as 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are 230 to 245.
Right.
And then you got one guy that's 300 pounds. I mean, you do the math on all that. You're light even by today's standards. But, some of these teams you're going to see are going to spread the field on a down by down basis. I think that'll probably start with Utah State in the season opener. Now, you get more into Texas, maybe Sark gives you some, heavier personnel, makes you adapt to that. Maybe you can't do it against everybody, but maybe there are some situations and some teams where, the way that they play allows you to get away with being lighter to that extent. I don't think when you go against, say, maybe a Texas A&M, you're going to want to be that light in the box, because Jimbo's still going to try to run it at you with a tight end or two on the field, maybe a fullback and a tight end. Yeah. LSU with Brian Kelly, I think, going to be tight end friendly in that offense. Auburn's still going to probably be that way with Brian Harsin in that offense. So I don't know if it's an every down, every week situation, Chase, but some weeks you might be able to run it out there more than just in the rabbits.
It reminds me a little bit of a story that Saban has told infrequently. I've probably only heard him mention it once or twice, but when he coached for Earl Bruce at Ohio State and wanted to get 5 DBs on the field, wanted more speed on the field to deal with the passing game, Earl was a stickler for 7 and 8 man fronts, and he's also a stickler for that strong safety being basically an extra linebacker. And Nick kind of saw where that was going before it went.
Yeah, it's a different game, a little different game. Hell, it's a different game just in terms of 10 years ago. You think about some of the Alabama defenses and the way they played just here in the last decade under Nick Saban, and how much he's continued to evolve and adapt in terms of his approach and what he feels good about running out there.
Poor Lee Osment would have been a Mike linebacker day and age or something.
Yeah, Lee was probably a Mike back then, but they played him at safety. But no, I mean, he was a really good player, and you're right. It's just a different game altogether. I mean, when you get in dime now, your Mac, your middle linebacker, and your dime, he better be able to get into coverage and play some man-to-man even. I mean, your slot corners now have to be able to play man. Your safeties have to be able to man up with the way teams spread the field.
It's one reason I think Nick's been working Brian Branch at cornerback a little bit too. because especially if injuries continue to hamper Ricks and or Jackson into the season, maybe you see a little bit more Branch at corner.
You could, you've got Jacquez Robinson still in that mix that apparently worked with the twos, I guess, on Saturday with corner down and another one trying to get back. So you're starting to, this is where you start to wonder too. Earl Little Jr., the signee that came in from South Florida, the son of the Miami legacy, and had to have the shoulder injury fixed from high school. You wonder right now where he might be in all this if he were able to go.
That is going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. I want to thank our listeners and viewers for joining us here once again. Be sure to bring us back next Sunday night. Travis and I, by that point, will be looking ahead to Utah State, and that'll be depth chart Monday Eve, Travis, next Sunday. So maybe we even postpone next week's podcast till that
organizational groupings.
Administrative.
Administrative. Oars, a lot of oars on that first administrative groupings chart.
All over the place. And capital O, capital R.
Yes.
Capital
yes. Letters. Screaming at you that it's not this guy. It could be this guy.
That's going to do it for us. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News, and we will talk to you next week here on Talkin Tide.